This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group and your host of Washington Current Review, where we interview leading voices from business, politics, that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is Varghese George. Varghese is a dear friend, and he works for the India's largest newspaper called Hindu. So welcome to our show and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Frank. Nice being here.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in the southernmost part of India, the state called Kerala. I moved to Delhi for my education. I grew up until my undergrad. I studied in Kerala, then came to Delhi. And I studied in Delhi, then I worked in Delhi as a journalist, and I worked in Bihar as a journalist. Now I am working as a journalist in the United States capital. In those journalistic years, I worked with three of India's biggest newspapers, with the Indian Express, with the Hindustan Times, and now with the Hindu. So as I would summarize it, I would probably be the only journalist who may have worked in Patna and Washington, D.C.
That's the best way to describe it. Patna is Bihar, correct?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So what's the life of a journalist like, either in India or United States? How would you define, how would you say that? What's it like? Besides being pretty busy.
Yeah, I think for people who would enjoy being busy, and people would not only that, people who do not mind the fact that they would have to be on call all the time, for somebody who would enjoy that being in that kind of an atmosphere and situation, despite the fact that it can actually appear and feel very unreasonable occasionally, overall, if somebody enjoys being in that kind of a situation, I think that person is cut out to be a journalist. There are many people who would like the rhythm of life defined by time, 9 to 5 or whatever kind of the way they would decide it. I think they may find journalism as a kind of a very restraining or a kind of
so it's a 24/7 job.
It's not that you're working all 24/7, but you have to be in some way engaged with that world 24/7. Yeah.
And you work in India, you just mentioned, and now you work in the United States, and you're a great journalist, and I'm glad that the Hindu has sent you as a journalist to the United States. What the challenges do you face and what's the difference between being a journalist in India and the United States?
Well, I think in United States, from whatever last 6 months of my experience as a journalist has been, there's a lot of emphasis that the protagonist of a story or gives to the fact or the idea of creating and sustaining a narrative, whether it is Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or the US State Department. They do know, okay, this is what the image that we want to project, and they work a strategy around that. Mm-hmm. In India, the way India's politicians, India's governments, India's organizations, including businesses, deal with the media or public perception in general is a little half-facade way. So therefore, their interaction with journalists also are a little random, little personal, and at some levels quite not so professional, I would say. That is changing, I would say, because India also, because of the increasing interaction with the US society and India.
And also internet
and all that things. There is a global way of looking at things happening. So there is a lot of changes happening, but still, I think that is primarily the key difference.
So over here in the United States, they frame the story.
Absolutely, yeah, you put it, yes, you said it.
So the social media has taken over, in a sense, some people say journalists. Has it changed? And if so, how it has changed, the social media?
Tremendously, because the thing is, at least theoretically at the moment, a journalist is irrelevant. A journalist has no role. I would say, what is the role of a journalist? A journalist would be in a position to converse with someone like you, who is an investor, who is a big businessman, or a politician, and then a journalist mediates that flow of information from you, or a politician, or the president, or whoever the case.
You extract the best out of the person, individual.
At one level, and I also vet. The fact that I am a professional journalist puts me at a space where I am given an authority and a credibility to question you.
Right.
That is a rule of engagement. So I question you or somebody else on behalf of an audience, and then I am a mediator. The idea of social media replacing journalism actually demolishes that whole idea of mediation in the process. So whoever is creating the news is tweeting it or putting out it on Facebook, or he is communicating it himself.
So that means the public get access to the information and the news before you write the story in your newspaper.
They get access to information, but the information is not corroborated one,
Okay.
and that information is not filtered in the sense that it is not been cross-questioned. So somebody is saying this is what happened, so nobody has asked that somebody.
Good point you
Yep,
made.
yep.
So there is really no.
It's a one-way communication.
Exactly.
So you can like or
you haven't
delete.
you haven't vetted the story well enough to write. So there's two sides of the story.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's what you do.
Absolutely. I mean, as a consumer, a Twitter consumer of news, all what I can do to what, say, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton will say on Twitter is to either like or dislike.
That's exactly right. So what's your view about Indian Americans and what's their contribution to U.S.? As you know, they're a modern minority. They have been politically engaged for the last 30 years. It's a new phenomena, and it's a work in progress. We have two governors of Indian American origin. Hopefully, we'll have a bunch of Indian American senators, and also we have Amy Bera in the House, and there are several others in the local levels. And so they're very much politically engaged. And business-wise, they have made a lot of difference in America, and for that matter, all over the world. So what's your view on this?
Well, I think whatever is happening in terms of governance, democracy, business, communication in both countries is primarily driven by this close-knit relationship that is evolved between these two societies, not merely to these countries in a broader state-to-state level. If you look at not only at the political aspect that you mentioned, not only that the American tech industry is driven by Indian talent to a great extent, and nowadays increasingly as the way the political participation is maturing, the tech companies are also now increasingly being led by Indians, whether it is Google or Microsoft,
Sure.
etc. So the way I look at it is that even as the Indian communities, Indian American participation is increasing in the US in various facets, I think it is also calling for a closer look and adjustment in the way, because the Indian community involvement in US politics has been modeled around, I would say broadly speaking, Indians would aspire to be what the Jewish community has been here, influential, rich, which they are, and politically
Engaged. They're very active participants in the political process.
Absolutely. But as we try to do that thing, we also see big pushbacks coming in the form of Donald Trump, for example. Because what is America? There is a question on that. People are trying to define it in their own ways. So therefore, there have been instances in which protesters have gone to Donald Trump's rallies with the Mexican flags.
Sure.
So this is one country where you can have multiple loyalties. You can be loyal to India and be loyal to America. You can be loyal to Pakistan and be loyal to US. This is a country which allows you that space, or so far it has allowed that space. But there is a debate on that point. What defines being American is. Therefore, I think the way I look at it is the Indian American engagement in the US politics will have to account for the current realities of US politics, the reaction, the rebellion, the kind of narrow viewpoints which are actually animating,
which is the divisive, and
polarizing thing. So Indians will have to engage in US politics, mindful of the fact that there is a lot of sensitivities involved, there are a lot of vested interests at play. A model which may have worked, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, may not be necessarily the model that
you made a good point.
Indian should be following. Yes.
Good question. So, how can Indian Americans, and you mentioned there could be, they're patriotic Americans, but they also care about India. So how can Indian Americans work and engage themselves in the development of India? India needs a lot of technical help, a lot of things. India needs it. India needs a lot of cash also. So how can Indian American like myself, or many other successful, can help through the development of India?
Well, I think this is a very, I would say, a little offbeat kind of a view I have. One is that your success is a model for Indians. That is a way normally we would present Indian Americans before an Indian audience and say, look at Frank Islam or look at Satya Nadella or look at,
sure.
they are big success stories, so we should be successful. But then the fact is that there cannot be as many, I mean, all Indians
Of course
cannot be,
not.
not
Of
even
course
1% of all in
Sure.
India, given the huge and vast size of the number of Indians.
Sure.
So I think the engagement that
But they do inspire them.
they do inspire them, and also I think when the way the successful Americans in the US engage with India and try to facilitate changes in India, I think it cannot be from a perspective that they have earned in the United States, because that model would work in a particular geographic and political setting
It may not, yeah.
in the US. It may not work in Aligarh, it may not work in Thiruvananthapuram.
So they have to adopt it.
They have to adopt it, I think, and they have to be again mindful of the fact that only because it worked in the US,
It doesn't mean
it doesn't mean that it will work in Kanpur. So I think when people who are successful here, when they go back to India and try to help India, the thing to be mindful is that the local situations and the political economic realities.
They have to face the reality. So the Prime Minister Modi just came here, visited it. So my question to you is, what has he accomplished besides giving a speech to the joint session of a Congress? And where is the U.S.-India relationship is headed?
Well, I think what Prime Minister Modi did from early days in, I mean, that is also his style and character, that he has a knack of creating a big narrative, the original point that we spoke about. He has created a narrative which was lacking for India, and that is a language and an idiom that an American audience would understand easily. An understated, scholarly, nuanced approach of his predecessor, which is Manmohan Singh, it turned out to be a little laborious for the level of American patience at all levels. So Modi has been successful in creating a narrative of India being a country waiting in the wings to take off and all that thing. So therefore Americans were very enthused, really enthused by the fact American business and the American government were all quite excited about the prospects of a completely radical change in what India could bring up. But what has happened over the last 2 years is that Modi, as any Indian Prime Minister would do, I would say, and Modi even more because of the very deep nationalist that he is.
It's a democracy.
It's a democracy. There are conflicting.
We got to get a consensus.
So now we have reached a point where only yesterday there was a US State Department statement which said, a report, annual report on investment climates, which said the rhetoric and actions have not matched.
No. The words hasn't matched their deeds.
The words have not matched their deeds. Now that is a dilemma which both sides will have to reconcile. While it was essential for Modi or India to recreate or to hype that narrative, now at some levels that reality is now biting. Now that narrative will have to be tempered at some level, and from the US side they will have to realize that regardless of what one leader, howsoever popular he might say as a narrative, there are other realities you'll have to deal with, because India being such a diverse and big country.
Well, there are a lot of things that binds us together besides the democracy and the diversity. Those are the two values that we cherish, nourish, and nurture in the United States, and those are things that the India has. The diversity, obviously, diversity of inclusiveness has a little bit of a challenge there in India right now. But when the new administration comes in, what advice do you have for the president in terms of the strengthening and broadening and deepening our engagement with India? What advice do you have for a new president of the United States? I would hope it will be Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. So I think both sides, I would say, that advice I would say should be for both sides.
You should.
Yeah, because both India and US have tried to fit in a certain amount of Cold War logic into the way they conducted their business, which primarily I would knock it down to one line, which is that you are either with me or against me. So I can be with you on A, B, C things.
But I could be against you
I
on
could
some
be
other
against you
thing.
on some other things. So this is something that both countries have been nagging, bickering against each other. India says you are supporting Pakistan. America says you are not doing this on intellectual property. You are not doing this in this sector, etc.
And well, you can go on and on. There's a lot of things.
So I think the mutual realization that I could disagree with you on 50 things, but I can agree with you on 60 things, other things. So work on those.
So they're not unite them.
The focusing on what unites these countries,
and then come up the differences where there are some differences, because we are living in a democratic world.
Absolutely.
And then work out those differences.
Absolutely. Even if some differences may not be able to reconcile at all, let them be. I mean, you accept it, because you do accept that kind of relationships in your friendships, in your social circles. It could very well be possible between
So I hear you saying that the new administration had to recognize that there will be some differences between the United States and India. They need to work out the differences.
And all,
What other things that the new administration to do? Should the new administration push, obviously, for the strengthening the relationship in terms of the national security issues, also sharing the intelligence, the terrorism things that was going on in the world, especially either across the border in Pakistan, other places, and what happened in Dhaka, and also making sure that India can have a permanent seat in United Nations. Those are the things do you feel the new administration needs to work on?
Well, I think if given the current Indian administration's priorities and the way any sensible future prime minister in India will see it in the future, the primary interest of any Indian government would be, all these issues are of importance. Security is a big concern, that is an immediacy to that concern. But medium-term interest of any Indian Prime Minister, the key interest will be job creation in India.
So it's promoting the trade and commerce and investment.
In a way that it promotes jobs in India, because that is where an Indian Prime Minister would. So you can have trade and commerce and technology.
But it has to be both ways. It has to be a reciprocal relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. What I'm saying, what if you are trying to understand what India might be seeing at it. So even if you support India for the permanent seat on the UN Security Council, an Indian Prime Minister would value something where that's the way I put it.
That's a good point you made.
And also the way US has understood partnerships so far, its partnership with Japan, Australia, South Korea, most of Europe, particularly Britain. That's not a model that US can again use to understand its relationship with India or develop.
What's the difference between, for example, having the relationship with European Union, and Britain? We have a very special relationship, if you will. What kind of things that differs in terms of the relationship between India and our relationship with Great Britain?
For example, now that we are discussing the UK's own internal investigation into what happened in Iraq war.
Yes.
So very interesting.
You're talking about Tony Blair's.
Tony Blair. Yeah. So the memo that Tony Blair is writing to George Bush in very clear, specific terms, whatever you do, I am with you. That kind of an approach you will never expect. You should never expect from an Indian Prime Minister in the near future. That is a key difference.
But that's a special relationship. We always stood for Great Britain. So remember the Falkland War? I mean, Ronald Reagan went out of the way and he stood for it. So there's a special relationship.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not going to exist with India.
Difficult, because India has its own ideas about being an exceptional country, being a regional power, independence, strategic autonomy. The various multiple examples from recent past, including in Obama administration, where India had different take, US a different take, and then the circle it comes full circle. I'll give you only one example. When President Obama came and spoke to Indian Parliament, he picked on one particular issue, which was Myanmar. He said that if India wants to be a
regional power,
India has to take a strong stand vis-a-vis the junta, in Myanmar. Now, at that point in time, India was trying to start and increasing engagement with the military regime in Myanmar. Within a couple of years, US had a review of its own policy vis-a-vis
That's exactly right.
The Myanmar. So an Indian perspective would say that, I mean, we were right. We thought that is the way it would go. So I think leaving that kind of autonomous choices on occasions and leaving that space for disagreements, and at the same time knowing that we have much more than these disagreements that bind us together is
Good
what.
point.
Yeah.
I look at a brighter horizon even when you endure some of these storms that we have.
Absolutely,
In
yes.
terms of U.S.-India relationship to the next height in the new administrations. And we look forward to working with India to strengthen our relationship.
Absolutely.
But thank you,
Thank you so much,
Varghese, for coming here and sharing your thoughts. And I find it very interesting. I'm sure
My
the
pleasure.
audience will find it interesting.
Thank you for having me.
This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.